What would you do if someone offered you $1 million to walk into a cage with a dog that put 3 professional trainers in the hospital? Most people would run the other way, but not everyone is, most people. And this story is about a 12-year-old girl with nothing to lose who saw something in that monster that no one else could see. And what happened next will absolutely wreck you. Let me take you to northern Texas. Not the glitzy, glamorous part you see in movies. I'm talking about the vast, lonely stretches where money builds walls so high that the rest of the world disappears. That's where Ethan Ward lived. And if you don't recognize that name, you should. This guy was a legend, a tech genius who built an empire from nothing. The kind of success story they write books about, but success has a funny way of not mattering when you lose the things that actually count. Ethan had walked away from it all. The boardrooms, the press conferences, the spotlight. Now he lived alone on an estate so massive you could get lost for days. And the only company he kept? Dogs. Dozens of them. German shepherds. Mostly. He'd rescue them, train them, give them a second chance at life. But there was one dog that was different from all the rest. They called him Titan. And Titan wasn't just another rescue. He was a nightmare wrapped in fur and muscle. Massive doesn't even begin to describe him. This German shepherd stood taller than most grown men when he reared up. His eyes weren't just dark. They were cold, empty. The kind of eyes that looked straight through you and saw nothing worth caring about. And his growl, that sound didn't just scare you. It settled into your bones and stayed there. 3 professional dog trainers had tried to work with Titan. 3. These weren't amateurs. These were people who'd spent their entire careers around aggressive animals. People who'd rehabilitated dogs that everyone else had given up on. The first trainer lasted 6 minutes before Titan cornered him against a fence. The second one needed 18 stitches across his forearm. The third, he didn't even want to talk about what happened. All he said was, "That's not a dog. That's something else entirely." And yet Ethan refused to put Titan down, refused to give up on him. Why? Nobody really understood, but if you looked closely at Ethan's desk, buried under papers and coffee stains, you'd find a clue. An old photograph of faded, creased, worn from being held too many times. It showed a young boy, maybe 8 years old, with a huge smile on his face, and next to him sat a German shepherd that looked remarkably like Titan. Underneath, in handwriting that had faded over the decades, someone had written, "Mian Ranger, 1965. That photo told you everything you needed to know. This wasn't about Titan. Not really. This was about a boy who lost his best friend a lifetime ago and was still trying to find him again. So Ethan did something that seemed absolutely insane to everyone who heard about it. He made an announcement. $1 million. That's what he'd pay to anyone, literally anyone, who could reach Titan, who could make him gentle again, who could prove that somewhere inside that aggressive, dangerous animal, there was still a soul worth saving. People called it madness. They said he'd lost his mind. But here's the thing about desperate people with unlimited resources. They don't care what others think. They just keep searching for the one thing money can never guarantee. Hope. N-O-W. Let's shift our focus about 300 miles south, to a city where the bright lights only illuminate how much darkness exists in the shadows. That's where Lena lived. Well, lived is probably too generous a word. Survived is more accurate. 12 years old, and completely on her own. No parents, no family, no safety net. Just her and the streets, and whatever she could figure out day by day. She'd gotten good at being invisible. That's a skill you learn fast when you're homeless. You learn which alleys stay empty at night, which gas stations let you use the bathroom without buying anything, which dumpsters behind which restaurants have the best chance of yielding something edible. You learn how to curl up small, how to stay quiet, how to disappear when the wrong kind of attention comes your way. Lena had been doing this for 2 years. 2 years of cold, concrete, and hungry nights. 2 years of being looked through instead of looked at. 2 years of being nobody. And then one afternoon, crouched behind a dumpster near a truck stop, she overheard something that would change everything. 2 drivers were talking, laughing, Really? One of them said. Did you hear about that crazy rich guy up north? Ward or something? He's offering $1 million to anybody who can tame his killer dog. The other one snorted. That shepherd's a straight-up monster. Already put 3 people in the hospital. Nobody's getting near that thing and living to spend the money. They laughed again and walked away, but Lena didn't move. She sat there, hidden, thinking about what she'd just heard. $1 million. An amount of money so large she couldn't even really picture it. But that's not what stuck with her. What stuck was something else entirely. A dog that nobody could reach. A dog that everyone had given up on. A dog that was too dangerous, too broken, too far gone. She thought about that all night, huddled under the awning of an abandoned storefront, wrapped in a thin blanket that smelled like mildew. She couldn't stop thinking about that dog, because here's what Lena understood that nobody else did. She knew what it felt like to be looked at, like you're dangerous, like you're trouble, like you're better off being avoided. Maybe he's not bad, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Maybe he's just alone. By the time the sun came up, she'd made her decision. She was going to find that dog. It took her 2 full days of walking. Following highway signs, sleeping in ditches, drinking from gas station water fountains. Her feet blistered, her stomach cramped from hunger. But she kept going, and finally, she saw them. Massive iron gates that stretched so high they seemed to touch the clouds. Beyond them, a driveway that disappeared into the distance. This wasn't a house. This was a fortress. Lena walked up to the guard station. The man inside barely glanced at her before speaking. You lost, kid. I heard about Titan, Lena said. Her voice was quiet but steady. I want to try to help him. The guard actually laughed. Not a friendly laugh, the kind that says, you're either crazy or stupid, and either way, I'm done talking to you. He turned away and went back to his phone. But Lena didn't leave. She sat down right there by the gate, and when night fell and it got cold, she wrapped her arms around herself and stayed. The next morning, the guard was surprised to see her still there. Go home, he said, less amused now. I don't have a home, Lena replied. That's why I'm here. Day 3. Day 4. The guard started talking about her, the weird kid who wouldn't leave. Some felt sorry for her. Others thought she was just trying to scam her way onto the property, but none of them knew what to do with someone who simply refused to give up. On the 4th morning, something changed. A voice crackled through the guard's radio. Just 3 words. Let her in. The gates opened with a low mechanical hum, and standing at the end of the driveway, watching her walk toward him, was Ethan Ward himself. He was tall. Silver hair, perfectly combed. Expensive clothes, they probably cost more than some people made in a year. But his eyes, His eyes looked tired, like he'd been searching for something for so long that he'd almost forgotten why. He looked at Lena's torn sneakers, her dirty clothes, the exhaustion written across her face, and he said, "You're the one who's been waiting." Lena nodded. Why? It was a simple question, but the way he asked it made it clear he really wanted to know. He wasn't testing her. He genuinely didn't understand why a homeless child would camp outside his gates for 4 days, just for a chance to meet a dangerous dog. Lena looked right at him, because no one else could reach him. Maybe that means I'm supposed to try. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. For just a second, that exhausted wall cracked, and he said quietly, "Be here at sunrise tomorrow. You get 1 chance." That night, Lena slept in the guard station. They gave her a blanket, a sandwich. It was the most comfortable she'd been in months, but she barely slept, because tomorrow morning, she'd come face to face with the beast everyone feared. When the sun rose, the air was sharp and cold. Lena stood outside the training yard, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. And then she saw him. Titan stood in the center of the yard, chained to a heavy post. His muscles were tense, coiled like springs, ready to explode. His ears were pinned back, His lips curled just enough to show teeth, and when he saw Lena, his eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Handlers stood at a safe distance, watching, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Ethan stood among them, his face unreadable. Lena took a step forward, then another, moving slowly, not trying to seem threatening, not trying to seem confident either. Just present. Titan's growl started low, a rumble that came from deep in his chest. A warning, but Lena didn't stop. She kept walking until she was about 10 feet away, and then she did something nobody expected. She knelt down, not in submission, not in fear. She just made herself smaller, less imposing. She wasn't trying to dominate him or control him. She was just ... there. Titan's growl grew louder, angrier. He lunged forward, and the chain snapped tight with a metallic sound that made everyone flinch. Dust kicked up around his paws. His bark was sharp and vicious. But Lena didn't move, didn't scream, didn't run. She just knelt there, her eyes on the ground, her breathing steady. Minutes passed. Long, agonizing minutes where nobody dared to breathe too loudly. The handlers were ready to rush in. Ethan's hand was tense at his side. And then ... Something changed. Titan stopped barking. His ears lifted slightly. He was still tense, still wary, but the raw aggression faded just a bit. He watched her, really watched her, trying to figure out what this small, quiet human was doing. Slowly, cautiously, he sat. Lena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread. She'd saved it from the sandwich they'd given her the night before. She placed it gently on the ground between them and then pulled her hand back. Titan's nose twitched. He sniffed the air, and then, inch by inch, he moved closer. His massive body was still coiled with tension, but something had shifted. The wild, uncontrollable rage had dimmed. He sniffed the bread, and then, with surprising gentleness, he took it. The yard was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And then Titan did something that made grown men's eyes water. He sat down next to Lena. Not touching her. Not threatening her. Just ... Beside her, like he'd been waiting for someone to finally just sit with him instead of trying to fix him, Ethan stepped forward slowly. His voice was barely above a whisper. You... Did Italiano. Nobody's ever gotten that close to him. He paused, then said something that sounded rehearsed, like he'd been planning to say it all along. $1 million is yours. But Lena shook her head. She looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. I don't want the money, she said softly. Ethan blinked. What? I want a place to stay, a real bed, 2 meals a day. She paused, and her voice got even quieter. And I want to go to school. I want to learn things. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her. This kid who'd just done something 3 professionals couldn't do wasn't asking for wealth. She was asking for basics, for normalcy, for a chance. Finally, he nodded. You'll stay in the main house. We'll get you enrolled. School starts next week. That night, for the first time in 2 years, Lena slept in a real bed. Clean sheets. A soft pillow. A door she could close. And right outside that door, lying across the threshold like a guardian, was Titan. The beast everyone feared. The dog nobody could reach. Now calm. Now peaceful. Now protecting the one person who'd seen him, not as a monster, but as someone who just needed to be understood. Down to how. Ethan sat alone in his study. He picked up that old photograph. The one of him and Ranger from 1965. And for the first time in decades, he smiled. She didn't fix him, he whispered to the photo. She reminded him he was never broken. And from that day forward, something impossible happened. A lonely billionaire who'd lost his way, a homeless girl who'd lost everything, and a dangerous dog everyone had given up on. Together, they built something money could never buy. A family. Not a perfect one. Not a traditional one. But a real one. If this story hit you right in the heart, don't just scroll past. Give it a like, because stories like this deserve to be shared. Drop a comment and tell me what you felt, what you thought, or if you've ever experienced something similar. And if you believe that loyalty, second chances, and unconditional love are things this world desperately needs more of, then share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes the most broken things just need someone willing to sit beside them in the silence. And maybe, just maybe, we could all learn something from that.